In today's stories, I want to share something that still feels surreal when I think back on it, not because it involved violence or shouting or anything you'd expect to go viral instantly, but because it shows how easily an ordinary evening can be twisted into a full police incident. When suspicion replaces common sense and the wrong neighbor decides to turn imagination into authority. It was one of those late summer evenings where the daylight lingered longer than usual, casting a dull orange glow across the backyards of our quiet neighborhood. And after finishing a long day of work, I stepped outside hoping for nothing more than a little silence, a little space to breathe, and a brief escape from the constant noise of daily life that never seems to stop even when you close your front door. The heat hadn't fully faded yet. The air was thick and unmoving, and mosquitoes hovered aggressively in clusters as if they had been waiting all day for me to step outside, which is why I did what I had done countless times before without incident, lighting my small metal fire pit for ambience while placing a mosquito repellent coil nearby, so it could slowly burn and keep the bugs at bay without filling the air with any harsh smell or heavy smoke. The fire pit was modest, resting on stone pavers in the center of my yard, producing a soft crackle and a faint ribbon of smoke that rose gently before dissolving into the sky, while the mosquito coil released a thin, spiraling trail that barely reached above knee level, blending into the evening air so subtly that I hardly noticed it anymore as I settled into my chair and let my shoulders finally relax. For a few quiet minutes, everything felt peaceful, the kind of calm that makes you forget how tense your body has been all day, and I remember thinking how grateful I was for this small backyard, for this routine, and for the sense of normalcy it brought me, completely unaware that this moment of calm was already being watched from behind a fence. The first sign that something was wrong came not from a voice, but from movement, a slow shifting shadow near the boundary of my yard that caught my attention just enough to make me look up. And that's when I saw her standing there on the other side of the fence, completely still, arms crossed tightly across her chest, eyes locked onto my fire pit as though she were observing something dangerous, rather than a neighbor enjoying his evening. She was known in the neighborhood, not by friendliness or warmth, but by reputation alone, the kind of person people quietly warn newcomers about with lowered voices and careful words, often referred to simply as the wife because her husband stayed out of sight while she handled confrontations, complaints, and corrections with an intensity that made even the most confident people uncomfortable. She cleared her throat loudly enough to cut through the crackle of the fire, and without offering a greeting or asking how my evening was going, she asked in a sharp, deliberate tone what exactly I was burning back there. Her words framed less like a question and more like an accusation that had already been decided. I explained calmly that it was a small fire pit and a mosquito repellent coil, both legal, both common, and both used responsibly, pointing casually toward the coil box sitting on the table as visual confirmation, hoping that seeing a familiar product might immediately diffuse whatever concern she had built up in her mind. Instead of relaxing, her expression tightened further, her gaze narrowing as she followed the thin smoke rising into the air, as she stepped closer to the fence as though physical proximity might reveal some hidden wrongdoing that distance had concealed. She said there was a lot of smoke, emphasizing the word lot in a way that suggested danger, despite the fact that the smoke was barely visible and drifting away harmlessly. And in that moment, I realized that facts were no longer part of the conversation. I tried once more to explain, keeping my voice even and respectful, but her body language made it clear she wasn't interested in understanding, muttering instead about people doing strange things these days and how to never really know what someone is up to, statements vague enough to imply suspicion without ever stating it outright. Before I could respond, she turned away abruptly, already pulling out her phone, thumbs moving rapidly as she walked back toward her house, and a heavy sense of unease settled into my chest because I knew exactly what that posture meant, having seen it before in other situations involving other neighbors. I considered extinguishing the fire and going inside, but something about the situation felt deeply unfair because I hadn't broken any rules, hadn't disturbed anyone, and hadn't done anything deserving of fear or punishment. So I stayed seated, telling myself that reason would prevail if it came to that. 15 minutes later, the quiet of the evening shattered as flashing red and blue lights washed across my backyard, reflecting off windows and fences, transforming a peaceful residential street into the scene of an emergency that never actually existed. The police cars pulled up in front of my house, doors opening slowly as officers stepped out, with cautious professionalism scanning the area while nearby porch lights flicked on one by one, silhouettes appearing behind curtains as neighbors watched silently, already forming opinions without context. An officer approached me and asked if I lived there, his tone neutral but alert. And when I confirmed that I did, he explained that they had received a report of suspicious smoke and possible illegal burning, words that sounded absurd given the reality in front of us. I calmly walked them through everything, showing the fire pit, the mosquito coil, the packaging, and even local guidelines on my phone, and as they examined the setup, their expression shifted from concern to quiet resignation, the kind that suggests they've responded to this exact scenario more times than they like. Meanwhile, Karen had positioned herself prominently on her front lawn, arms crossed and posture rigid, watching the interaction with visible satisfaction, as though she were witnessing justice unfold rather than a misunderstanding she had manufactured. When the officers asked her what she had seen, she launched into a dramatic retelling, filled with exaggerated descriptions of thick smoke, chemical smells, and unsafe behavior, each detail growing more intense than the last, despite none of it matching reality. One officer glanced back at the fire pit, then at the coil, and calmly stated that it was a standard mosquito repellent product sold at any hardware store, prompting her expression to harden instantly, as she snapped back that she couldn't be expected to know that and that it looked suspicious. That single statement revealed everything, because it wasn't about danger or legality, but about perception, about how easily discomfort turns into accusation when someone believes their feelings alone justify calling the police. The officers informed her that there was no violation and no risk, apologized to me quietly for the inconvenience, and left the scene as calmly as they arrived, while Karen retreated indoors, without apology, already rewriting the story in her head. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted noticeably, with sideways glances, whispered conversations, and subtle avoidance, not because anyone truly believed I had done something wrong, but because people didn't want to become her next target. I later learned she had been telling others that I was nearly arrested, and that the police were watching me, twisting the event into something far more sinister than it ever was. And while the rumors frustrated me, what hurt most was realizing how easily someone could feel unsafe in their own home simply because another person decided to escalate harmless behavior. Eventually, a few neighbors approached me privately, sharing their own stories of being reported over trivial things, confirming that this wasn't personal, but pattern. And while that didn't erase the experience, it helped put it into perspective. I still sit in my backyard, I still light my fire pit, and I still use mosquito coils. But now I do so with a heightened awareness of how fragile peace could be when someone mistakes control for concern. Because sometimes the smoke isn't the danger at all, and the real problem is the person who can't stand seeing someone else live quietly, freely, and without permission.